Megalodon, perhaps the most famous ancient shark of all time. This ancient behemoth prowled the waters of the world from the early Miocene, with a total span of around 23 million to 3.6 million years ago. However, despite the fossil record running cold for several million years, many people still believe the Meg could be lurking somewhere to this day, giving a range of explanations. Some plausible, others less so. Well, today we'll be debunking some of the most popular of these. First up, and perhaps the most credible of all, is the theory that the Meg didn't actually go extinct, and there's just been a gap in the fossil record. This theory is based on the idea that just because the Megalodon's fossils have been missing from the fossil record for millions of years, it doesn't necessarily mean it went extinct. Just that no specimens died and were buried in the very specific conditions needed for fossilization. And this isn't an unfounded idea either. Indeed, so-called living fossils have been rediscovered in recent times, with the iconic coelacanth being the most famous. In fact, the coelacanth is perhaps even more dramatic than the Megalodon. It was believed that the coelacanth had gone extinct due to the last known fossil being dated to around 66 million years ago. It was no doubt a huge shock then that the fish was found alive and well in 1938 in the Indian Ocean. So if the coelacanth pulled off perhaps the biggest game of hide-and-seek in history, what's to say the Megalodon couldn't do the same? It seems a potentially fair argument, especially when considering that shark bodies don't fossilize easily, and the 3.6 million window gap is much smaller than 66 million years. But there's a glaring issue here. Most Meg fossils are of their teeth. And since a single Megalodon specimen could produce 40,000 teeth over their lifetime potentially, that's a lot of teeth to somehow miss fossilization over so many specimens. They also had a huge range too, so it's not like they were only found in a small area of land that's gone unexplored. In contrast, the coelacanth was mainly found in deep water in the past, likely contributing to its lack of fossils. So, no. While there are other cases of extant species missing a corresponding recent fossil record, the Meg just isn't likely to be one of them. But that does lead us nicely onto the second, theoretically plausible explanation. At least at surface level. We haven't found the Megalodon in modern times because it's evolved to live in deeper waters instead. The Mariana Trench, for instance. Once again, this is a theory that has some loose basis in reality, believe it or not. Indeed, while it might sound incredulous that a massive shark could go unnoticed by humans for, well, our entire existence, there have been examples of giant species living in the deepest depths that we never knew about. Deep-sea gigantism is a well-known phenomenon in which species living at the deepest depths of the ocean often dwarf their counterparts in milder, shallow waters. Plus, despite being a myth for hundreds of years, the giant squid, clocking in at around 10 meters, was actually discovered to be a very real deep-sea species. In other words, it's definitely plausible that we could miss a massive species, so long as it lived in deeper waters than we generally visit and know much about. So maybe that's where the Meg's been lurking too. Well, no. While it's absolutely been proven possible for giant creatures to go under the radar of our knowledge if they live deep enough in the ocean, the Megalodon just wouldn't have been able to cut it in a deep water environment like the Mariana Trench. With very little light reaching the bottom depths of the ocean, ecosystems down there are sluggish, to say the least. The lack of sunlight means that plants can't photosynthesize at such extreme depths, thus eliminating the bottom trophic level of the basic food chain. As such, the food chain in the depths of the ocean is very different to elsewhere in the oceans, with photosynthesis being replaced with chemosynthesis around hydrothermal vents. In addition, marine snow, aka organic detritus, and whale falls from above also present a key source of nutrients for this biome. However, this is all in very limited supply, and as a result, while there's a surprising amount of biodiversity in the shallow depths, life is generally much slower down in the deep depths. Even predatory species are generally slow-moving, at least compared to their counterparts near the surface. An adaptation crucial to conserve energy in a low-energy environment. Given this, a massive apex predator such as the megalodon just wouldn't be able to find enough food in this comparatively barren environment to sustain itself. To put it in perspective, a single meg would have needed around 2,500 pounds of food every day just to sustain itself. Substantial prey of that size are few and far between in the depths, even if they'd be easy to catch for a fast swimmer. There's another major problem with this theory, though. Even if we overlook the lack of sustenance for such a huge shark in the depths, there's also the crushing pressure to contend with. Creatures at these depths generally have very little skeletal and muscular structure and have much more gelatinous flesh. Think the so-called blobfish. The megalodon couldn't have been further from this, and doing such an evolutionary U-turn in just 3 million years would have been impossible. Evolution can change a lot, but it can't change an apex predatory species into a gelatinous one overnight. Well, evolutionarily speaking, overnight. Now, that's not to say there aren't sharks in the deeper seas. The goblin shark and Greenland shark are two notable exceptions. But let's face it, these creatures are night and day compared to a megalodon. So that's two theories out of the running. No, the Meg's fossil record likely isn't just missing. And no, it's also probably not living in the deepest depths of the ocean. But how about the sightings of megalodons in the modern day? Thus far, we've mainly focused on the fact that the Meg just hasn't been seen. But that's not entirely the full story, and there are many people that claim to have seen a megalodon. Could they be right? Perhaps, some would even argue, there's even a governmental cover-up of the presence of the megalodon. Well, without hard evidence of what someone may have seen, there's technically no way to fully disprove it. However, the likelihood's just far greater that whatever they saw was not a megalodon. There are plenty of possible explanations. Perhaps they saw an especially large great white, a distant cousin of the Meg. Or maybe they saw another large species, such as a whale shark or a true whale in the distance, and mistook it. There are a lot of answers, much more likely, and that's before getting into the territory of people simply making up stories. And as for the government cover-up, well, the question here really needs to be, why would they do this? There's no particular reason the government would want to cover up the existence of the megalodon, and if they were, where on earth would they keep a breeding population in shallow waters that wasn't noticed by someone? It just doesn't add up. The final common theory for the Meg is simply that it's still out there, but in such low numbers that it just isn't ever seen. On the surface, this seems plausible. The ocean spans over 360 million square kilometers or so in total. So, if the population of megalodons was incredibly low, they could absolutely be missed in that massive expanse. However, the problem with this theory arises in the ability for the species to survive with such a low population. With so few individuals, the chances of a shark finding a mate regularly would be pretty low anyway. That's further complicated by the fact that megalodon babies would likely have eaten their weaker siblings in utero, as is seen in modern distant relatives, meaning the number of young sharks born per breeding would likely be low. And, with so few animals, sustaining a breeding population would be unrealistically precarious. After all, if not enough juveniles made it to adulthood, the population could be wiped out in no time at all. Keep in mind here that modern whales are known to regularly prey upon or attack young sharks too. So that would certainly put a breeding population small enough to hide from sight at major risk. And that's before getting into the complications of inbreeding. Take the critically endangered great hammerhead shark. Recent sequencing of their genomes have raised significant alarm bells for scientists due to inbreeding with low genetic variation, and their population is still estimated to be less than 100,000 individuals. This demonstrates on its own the issue with the small population theory. So altogether, while there are some other theories too, it's pretty much safe to say that no, the megalodon isn't still alive today. However, just because the Meg's gone doesn't mean the waters are a safe place, and modern apex predatory sharks are iconic enough in their environment as it is, if you ask us. Thanks so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more PaleoBrew videos soon.